So, for many years, there's been this Allstate commercial about chaos and about mayhem. Some of you might know about that. You may have you've seen that commercial. In fact, let's get a picture of the guy here. There he is. And I did a little research on him because, to me, life is kind of like mayhem and chaos in a lot of different ways. And when you watch those commercials, they're so funny, like bats crashing into windows, like you're barbecuing, and it sets the house on fire. The recent one I saw is he's falling through a roof, all these crazy things, or people doing crazy things in their cars. And what is he doing? He's there and he's laughing. He's mayhem, right? And you're like, mayhem, that's the last thing I need. And so we're gonna be talking about a mayhem situation today and chaos. But I was wondering about this guy. His name is Dean Winter, and he's been doing this commercial for over 10 years now. They got a lot of mileage out of it. And so when I looked into his own life, I discovered there's a lot of mayhem in his own life. Now, he's pretty popular. He's been in a lot of movies. He's been in a lot of TV series and things like that. And what I discovered about him is that in 2009, he woke up with a really hot fever one day, and so he was on his way to a medical facility, and he passed out when he got out of his car. Well, they got him into an ambulance. They rushed him to the hospital, and he was septic. And so he was in the hospital for an entire month. And basically, while he was there, he got gangrene, which makes matters worse, right? And so he lost 2 of his toes and also partial thumb. He had 18 surgeries following that with skin grafts and a lot of other things. So this is truly a guy who knows mayhem, right? And life is mayhem. We have no control over the weather. We have no control over most people. We have no control over the economy. We wish we did. We have no control for half the time over our parents and our children. It's mayhem and it's chaotic. And the funny thing is that we think we have control. And in fact, in our own way, a lot of us are sort of control freaks. We're just like trying to control our life, man. I got to control my life. I got to control these people in my life. And we're just fooling around. It's just an illusion. Because life is full of chaos and mayhem. Today is Mother's Day, and so we celebrate all of the women that have raised children because you understand mayhem. And you understand chaos. And man, like I have watched my own wife, and she is just an awesome mother. And so many times I think about in the years when we were raising our kids that it was that way. And my wife, she just got to say, I don't know, I think women have this special, magic about them. And she's, for me, I'm just standing there going, what do I do? And she's going, get out of my way. She just knew what to do. And that just seems to be a special gift. And so I'd like all of the ladies that have raised children, would you stand for a second? We want to acknowledge you. Yes, to stand. Yeah, give them a hand. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Wow. Thank you so much for what you've done. Well, today in chapter 4 of Mark, we've been in the book of Mark, we're going to look at a chaotic situation, but it's in the sea. It's actually in the Sea of Galilee. So last time we left off, Jesus was in a boat. He had just pushed off a little bit, and he was speaking to not hundreds, but thousands of people. And he was telling stories, and Jesus was a great storyteller. He called them parables. And these parables had a powerful, powerful meaning. So people, as Jesus would talk, people are just literally spellbound. And they're just listening to all these stories that he's telling. And last week we talked about the story of the sower and the seed. And then he began to tell some more stories after that are recorded in the 4th chapter of Mark. So he talks about the lamp. He talks about another growing seed. And then he finishes with the mustard seed, which the mustard seed is, he said, if you have a little mustard seed, which I actually have one in my office, and it's like the tiniest of seeds. But he says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can do great things. And so that's the way he finishes it. And it's kind of ironic because you'll see as we get into this story, apparently the seed didn't take. But so at the end of the day, he's tired. He's been speaking all day. Before that, he was healing people and casting out demons and does all the things that Jesus does. And so he's absolutely exhausted. And there's all these crowds are just clamoring around him. And so he needs to get away. He needs to get away from people and just get some rest. And as I was thinking about this, have you ever watched a celebrity, do an interview on TV or something? And when they're talking, they start to whine about the fact that they don't have very much privacy. And you're kind of like, oh, give me a break, wah, wah, wah. You're filthy rich, you're famous, you have all this stuff. But then again, think about it for a moment. What if that was you, and you literally could not get a private moment? You could never walk into a supermarket. I'm talking about somebody who's incredibly famous, right? And every time you go somewhere, the paparazzi's following you, you got autograph seekers, and you're like, oh man, I just want to have some privacy here, right? Multiply that by 10, and you have Jesus. You have thousands of people that are just around him, and they want stuff from him. They don't want his autograph. They want, like, can you heal me? Can you heal my mother? I heard that you give away free bread and fish. Can you take care of our family? I got a difficult situation. I mean, it's just one thing after another. So all these people are just clamoring around him, and he's just, he's tired. He's exhausted. So he's just like, let's just get in a boat and just go across the Sea of Galilee. So this is where we pick up the story in chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. You can actually read it on the screen along with me. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. And so they took Jesus in the boat, and they started over, leaving the crowds behind them, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. And Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? And when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, Silence, be still. And suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? The disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They ask each other. Even the wind and the waves obey him. So what can we learn from this short but breathtaking story today? There's 4 things I want to talk about. The first one is that storms are inevitable. Storms of life are absolutely inevitable. Whether they're atmospheric, environmental storms, relational storms, break heart storms, raising your children storms, cancer storms, all of it. Life is just full of that. And this particular storm was not your normal squall. So I did a little research. I've never been to the Holy Land. I've always wanted to go there, but I've read about it so many years. I know a few things about it. And so the Sea of Galilee, as some of you might know, is not actually a sea. It's actually a lake. It's actually fresh water, but they just always called it the Sea of Galilee. It's not very big. It's only 13 miles long, and it's 8 miles wide. And it sits very low. It sits 682 feet below sea level. It's the lowest sitting freshwater lake in the world. The only lake that sits a little bit lower, it's actually not a lake, it's a Dead Sea. And so there's some interesting features about the Sea of Galilee. Certain times of the year, especially during the summertime and the wintertime, they get these squalls that come up. And these squalls are powerful. And so the winds kind of descend off. There's one of the mountains is about 1,500 feet. Another one's about 3,000. They just sort of swoop in on this really small body of water. And they cause havoc. They just cause all of these waves and everything. So this is one of those days, but this is an anomaly. Like this is way, way more than that. Typically, they can get waves of 5 feet. Now, you never, ever are going to find 5-foot waves in a small body of water, but in this lake, you do. In 1992, it was reported that the waves got up to 10 feet in this lake, and on the shores of actually Tiberias, the place where Jesus was going to be going. Now, I'm a surfer, and I've surfed 10-foot waves, and I can tell you 10 foot is huge. So you can imagine this boat out in the water and these massive waves that are coming at them. Now, the guys on the boat with them, most of them are his disciples. There might have been a few other people. And the boat is not a big boat. The average boat in those times is around 26 foot long. All right, so they're out there, and they're just being tossed all over the place. And 7 of the 12 disciples were commercial fishermen. So these guys were used to being on boats. They were watermen. They understood those kind of conditions. But these guys are freaking out. I mean, they're really freaking out. And so, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all recorded this. So, you look at the different Gospels, and sometimes they all say, they'll all record something, and they said, we got to talk about this one. This is like crazy. This particular storm is spectacular in the worst kind of way. They've never experienced anything like this before. And that's what storms are. Storms are, they're mayhem and they're chaos, and they have the potential to cause panic. And if you've ever panicked, you never know what you're going to do. Sometimes when you panic, you do the most irrational things. So kind of on a metaphorical level, we face some big storms in life, don't we? If I was to sit down and talk to you about life, each one of you, you would tell me about your storms. You would tell me about heartbreak. You would tell me about loss. You would tell me about a career that just never worked out. You would tell me about dreams that you had and that never worked out. I mean, these storms. I mean, you talk to me about addiction and accidents and financial crisis and divorce, and we could just go on and on and on. Those are the storms of life. In this case, this is kind of the calm before the storm. These guys have actually had a really, really good day. It's been a super productive day. I mean, Jesus has healed a whole bunch of people and cast demons out of people, and I mean, it's been good. Up into this point. It was the calm before the storm. I don't know if you're wired this way, but I'll tell you something about myself, and I have a feeling some of you can relate to this. But do you ever feel like when everything is going too good, you're like, you know what, at any moment, I think at any time now, the hammer is going to drop. And usually if you feel that way, it's because you've been through some storms in your life. And I've had this fear, like a lot of my life. Like everything starts to smooth out, and I've got through a storm and everything is good. And I'm like, oh man, when's the next storm going to come? And I just want to say that is no way to live. And I'm talking to myself. That is just no way to live. God doesn't want us to live in fear of the storm. He wants us to enjoy life. And you're not going to enjoy life if you're just always worrying about like that next storm that's going to come along and you're just living in dread. Because the storms of life are inevitable. But if Jesus is with you, if he's, metaphorically speaking, if he's in the boat with you, you don't have to worry. So storms are inevitable. The next thing that we see is that Jesus is with us in the storm. And this is the most important thing. He's actually with us in the storm. In this particular situation, Jesus is in the boat. And what is he doing in the boat? What does it say? He was what? Sleeping. Isn't, like when we're going through the worst storms of our life, isn't that what we think sometimes? He's asleep. I'm dying, man. I am falling apart at the seams. And he must be sleeping because he's not paying attention to me. Does he know how much I'm hurting? Does he know that I'm going through all this? I'm praying and everything, and it just seems like he is sleeping. It seems like that anyway. Or it seems like this. He's not doing what he needs to do. And that's that part of us, like we want to control God. God, I know what needs to be done. You're not doing it. You're sleeping or something, So here these guys are. They're all freaking out. Total collapse of faith, really. Just heard a bunch of stories about faith and just total collapse of faith here. And so you've got sailors begging the carpenter to save them. Right? Which I think is kind of ironic in itself. And the fact that Jesus is sleeping through this, it shows us two things about Jesus. First of all, he's exhausted, right? He's sleeping in the midst of a storm. You can just sort of visualize, he's got his head down in this cushion, and he is just sleeping. And that really speaks to his humanity. Sometimes we forget, for some people, he was only human. For some people, he was only divine. But the Bible says he was both. He was 100% human. And this is we see kind of a human moment where he's just really, really tired. But he's also divine, which is the second thing that he does. He shows us that as well. And the fact that he's not freaking out also tells us something about the situation. Like, how come everybody else is they think it's the end of the world. They think they're going to drown. And Jesus is sleeping. And even when he wakes up, to him, it's not a catastrophic situation. Well, one of his disciples would later on write these words, and you'll find it in John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. It says, in the beginning was the Word. And when John was talking about this, the Word was Jesus Christ. He said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In other words, Jesus is co-creator of the world and everything that we see. And so the master of the storm, the one who creates everything, wasn't really stressed about it at all. He goes, I've got this under control. They didn't know that. I think one of the things that's really interesting about this is that Jesus led them into the storm. I mean, Jesus, he knew this was coming. In fact, he might have had maybe a slight little smile on his face when he went to sleep, thinking, they don't know what's coming. I know what's coming. We're going to lead these guys into a storm. And maybe you've been led into a storm. If you have a relationship with Jesus and you didn't even know that you were being led into the storm. Because a lot of times the storm has a purpose. The other day, I sat down with a couple of people from a missions organization, and they had read my bio before I met with them. And they asked me a lot of questions. And they said, hey, can you tell us about your the churches you planted and stuff like that, and your experiences? And I always start with the first church that I pastored, which was the biggest storm of my life. And it lasted quite a while. And so I started there, and I told them about that, and then I told them about some other things. And they go, hey, go back to that first church. I mean, that sounded pretty horrific. And I said, yeah, it was. And one of them asked me a really, really interesting question. She said, if you could go back in time and not have that experience, would you say, I don't want that experience? And I had to really think about it for a second because it was so painful. It was like the most painful experience of my life. And I thought about it and I said, no, I wouldn't change anything. And they said, well, why? I said, because I learned so much in that storm. I became a better husband. I became a better dad. I became a better pastor. I became more empathetic to people in their storms. I just became a better human being in every way. It was, again, the most painful storm I've ever been in my life. But it really helped me. And I know that, looking back, I know that God actually led me there. Hard to believe that, but sometimes God will lead us to the storm. Jesus leads these disciples to the storm because he's got some faith lessons that he wants to teach these guys. He wants to teach them that in the midst of a storm, I'm there with you and you can count on me. And it's interesting, fear, it affects people in different ways. One time, I'll never forget this, I was in a coffee shop in Ocean Beach and I was with my son-in-law, Micah, and I think I had another friend with us, and we're all surfers. And so we were talking about surfing. If you've ever been with, surfers love to talk about surfing and waves and stories and everything. And we're sitting down, and this guy overhears us, and he walks over to our table, and he sits down, and he's a surfer too. So now we got 4 of us, and we're all talking about surfing. And he goes, hey guys, I have a sailboat. You guys want to go out, and we can drop off over at Point Loma. And over at Point Loma, there's some breaks that are only accessible by boat. And we're like, yeah. So we set an appointment to go out there, and so I think it was may have been the week or 2 later. So I remember it was, I think it was either late fall, early winter, and we got off in the afternoon. We actually left over here from Pacific Beach, so we had a long way to go. And so we motored out, and then we get the sail up, and we get going, and immediately we realize the seas are way bigger than we thought they were. There's like a big swell going. And so, I was like, okay, well, this is going to be really fun. There'll be big waves. And so as we're motoring out, actually as we're sailing out at this particular point, it's pretty rough. I mean, we weren't out there too long. A couple of guys got seasick, and like, whoa, this is like, didn't quite expect it to be like that. The sea was wild, I can put it that way. But we're still heading out there. And at some point, I'm in the back of the boat, right where the rudder is. And the guy, this is the owner of the boat, right? The guy, he puts the rudder in my hand. He goes, here, take this. And I go, oh. And so he just takes off and he goes down below, down in the cabin, and just shuts the hatch, And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, maybe he had to go to the bathroom or something. I don't know. And so I'm there for a while, and it's getting gnarly, So after a while, and I'm a pretty good waterman, and I've done some sailing, so I'm really having to navigate, and the waves are coming from all over the place, But I'm doing, and I have to be honest, I like that kind of stuff, so I'm sort of having fun. And the guys that were getting seasick weren't having so much fun. But anyway, I'm out there, and I'm doing this. And so we get, it got pretty crazy. And so it got to a point where we had taken off too late. And I thought, oh my God, we're never going to make it in time to go surfing, that's for sure. And it's going to be dark. So I spun the boat around. I started heading back. And it's the same story. It's kind of crazy. And I'm thinking, where is the owner of the boat? I hardly even knew this guy. And so I'm doing all the navigating of this little sailboat. And then we finally get back up to the harbor over here. and it was time to motor in, and somebody yelled down there, and he's like, oh, he comes back up, and I'm just looking at this guy, I'm thinking, and I looked at him, I go, you okay? He's like, all right. I could not get a word out of him because I have questions, right? Like, what was going on? And it's just one of those moments where apparently this guy was just paralyzed with fear. And I was thinking about how in the storms that can happen to us. People react differently to storms of life. Some people literally are just paralyzed with fear, and they can't go on, and they're just stuck. When the storms of life come, there's all kinds of reactions. Jesus talks about all kinds of different storms. You know what one of the storms of life is? And Jesus actually talked about this a lot. It's persecution. I was just reading the other day in the book of Matthew about this. Jesus said this. For instance, if you're a serious Jesus follower, Jesus said, if they hated me, guess what? They're going to hate you. And if they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. And he talks about this a lot. He goes, if you follow me, if you pick up your cross and follow me the way that I want you to, he goes, you're going to suffer some persecution. And I was thinking about that because that's not something in the United States we think about too much. We think, well, I don't know. But really, the more that you walk with God in the current culture, you will at times experience it. You'll experience it maybe at work. You might experience it in your own family. I know a lot of people that when they became a Christian, their family just didn't want anything to do with them. You'll experience in social situations. There's a lot of different ways that you can experience just being shunned for for following Jesus. And it's a storm. So this is what Jesus said. I said, okay, what's the solution when you're being persecuted? And so Jesus had some really interesting words about this. He said in Matthew chapter 5, verses 11 and 12, he goes, blessed are you when people insult you. Some translations say, happy are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. He says, rejoice and be glad because great is your reward in heaven. That's probably not our natural reaction where we're being persecuted, right? But he says, no, it's actually a good thing. And so if you're in that kind of a storm, he's basically saying, you're good. You're good. You can actually be happy about it. And so getting back to this particular storm, verse 39, he rebukes the wind and says to the waves, quiet, be still. And then what does it say? Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. This is so bizarre. This is such a miracle. Getting back into the original language of the Bible, the way it was written, it's even more dramatic. It's like, and again, this is not that big of a body of water. This storm was horrific, huge waves. They're getting tossed around. And just like that, at the words of Jesus, suddenly it's calm. It's calm like a pond. Like it's glassy. There's no wind. and the reaction of the disciples is like, they don't even know what to do with this. I mean, it's just like, whoa, what just happened? Well, the third thing we see is that Jesus will get us through the storm. And that's what's going on here. He's going to get them through the storm. But he has some words for them as he's getting through the storm. And when he got them through the storm, when it was calm, he didn't say, hey guys, whew, that was tough. I didn't know if we were going to make it. Or maybe he could have toned it down a little bit and go, I know you guys are really scared. I'm sorry. He didn't say that. He rebukes them. It's kind of like, hey, did you realize I'm on the boat? Remember all the stories I told you? I'm on the boat. I'm with you. We're going to be okay. Where is your faith? When it comes to the storms that God has gotten us through, and like the next one's coming, a lot of us get amnesia. We do. I mean, and I'm guilty as charged sometimes. Like here comes a storm, something's like, oh no, it's coming. And we forget about that he got us through the last one, and we're like, God, what am I going to do about this? And sometimes we just have to go back, and God's going to go, did I get you through the last one? Yeah. Well, then why are you stressing? Have I ever failed you? No. Well, then where is your faith? So if you're here today, and you're in the midst of some kind of storm, whatever kind of storm it is, just know he's with you. He's going to get you through that storm. Some of you have heard this very, very famous poem. It's been around forever, but I think it's pretty powerful. It's a real beautiful word picture, and it's about, well, I'll just read it to you because it really speaks to me. It says, "One night I had a dream, and I walked with the Lord by the beach, and there were two sets of footprints, mine and the Lord's. But during the tough times, I saw mine, and I wondered why. And so I asked the Lord, why leave me alone when I was so down? And the Lord said, my precious child, I never left you during your times of trials and sufferings. When you saw one set of footprints, it's then that I carried you." When I look back on my life, I know that there are times that God carried me. In fact, one of the ways that you can know that, they always say hindsight's 20/20. So think back about some of the biggest storms that you've gone through in your life. Relational storm, divorce storm, whatever it was that God got you through, okay? And then as time goes on, you're going to begin to get some perspective you didn't have. You're going to begin to see pieces of that puzzle and what was going on you didn't see. Because when I look back on the biggest storm of my life, as time has gone on, I'm like, wait a second. You did carry me. You had all these people strategically around my life, in my life, just the right people, everything from a therapist to amazing life coaches that came along. I was just in such a panic, I didn't even consider it, and other people, friends that were praying for me, and so I look back at that, and I'm like you were carrying me, and I didn't even know it. Some of the biggest storms of life, God might even carry you. Well, the last thing that we see, is that Jesus is the master of the storm. This is the best news ever. After Jesus shut down the storm, the reaction of the disciples is, to me, kind of funny. They're no longer terrified of the storm. You know who they're terrified of? Jesus. They're like, oh man, who's in the boat with us? I mean, this guy just did that. Only God can do that. They just did not know what to do in that particular. I mean, nobody does that. But they've seen some miracles. I mean, by this point, Jesus has given sight to the blind, and people that couldn't hear, he's cured them, and he's cured leprosy. But this is on another level. For them, it's like, well, you did those things, and those were amazing. But that's like a godlike thing. Verse 41, they were terrified, and they asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. It was recorded by Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they all had a different word. It's interesting, from their perspective, and maybe all words were used, but when they yelled out, in Mark's, they go, teacher, when they're yelling. In Luke, it's master. And then Matthew, Mark, Luke. So Matthew says Lord. So they're yelling out these names, like, and I think the most important question that you and I will ever answer in our life is, who is the Lord to you? Who is he to you? Is he a great teacher? Is he a historical figure who did some really wonderful things and has some great teachings? Or is he Lord? Is he the Son of God? Is he who he said he was? Because if you believe that, it changes everything. When you're in the middle of a storm, you're like, oh yeah, he's God. Verse 40, and he said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? I think that's a really good question to ask yourself. I mean, maybe do you ever ask yourself that when you really experience tremendous fear? Do you ever think, why am I so afraid? And then maybe even kind of analyze that a little bit. Like, what is driving this fear in my life? I do that sometimes. And if you do that, it's a wonderful thing to do, because what you can do is you can invite Jesus into that space, that fear in your life. And you can say, okay, Lord, here's what it's really about. Finances. I'm freaking out because I just don't know if we're going to make it financially. Or it's my career. Or it's this relationship that I'm in. Or I don't know what to do with my kids. Or my parents are failing. There's all these different storms in life. And in that moment, we can look to him and know that, like, he'll be there. He'll get us through that. And again, that's that terrible fear, but I want to speak that into you today. What fear, when you walked in this building today, what fear did you bring into this building? What storm are you going through right now? And would you be willing to have enough faith to say, God, I think you can get me through this storm. I think that I can trust you with this situation that's going on in my life. And if you are trying to handle it, just by yourself with your own wits and your own intelligence and everything, let me ask the Dr. Phil question. How's that going for you? Seriously. Are you tired of trying to control everything in your life? Or maybe you could just turn it over to Jesus, the one who loves you so much. And he says, I'm here to help. I'm here to get you through the storm. What's a beautiful thing here is that the voice of Jesus, when he spoke words to the storm, he used his voice. And suddenly everything became calm. And if you need to be calm this morning, you need to hear his voice. You might say, well, Steve, how do I hear his voice? There's different ways to hear it, but you need to go where his voice is. And you will find his voice in Scripture. I encourage you, get in the Bible. Start to read. If you're not used to reading the Bible, start reading the Bible. You will find his voice in nature, one of the places I like to go sometimes, and whether it's in the mountains or whether it's actually in the ocean. Sometimes when I'm out there and I'm just meditating, it's like I can hear his voice. You can find his voice when you pray. And by the way, you don't have to have a sophisticated prayer. I don't know what kind of faith tradition you grew up in. Here's a real good one. Help! He actually hears that. And he'll respond to it as well. You pray. When we worship in song like we were doing, and we're going to do one more song here, but when we're worshiping, if you really get into worship, sometimes God speaks to us through worship. And then sometimes we can hear his voice through a teacher or a preacher just like me. God speaks in so many different ways. And so, what did this story teach us today? Quick recap here. Storms are inevitable. They're going to come. Jesus is with us in the storm. Jesus will get us through the storm. And then finally, Jesus is master of the storm. So I want to leave you with this. Do you have this is the most important part. Do you have a relationship with Jesus? Because if you don't, you're on your own. Are you in a storm right now? Good luck. Or you could commit your life to Jesus. Or you could say, I am not the master of my own universe anymore. I need help. And that's the whole point of Jesus. Came into this world to give us help. So if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, now's the perfect time to start. Especially if you're in a storm and you've been, doing everything you can do. Invite him into your heart today, into your life today. Just say, Jesus, I want to know you. I want to begin to have a relationship with you. And you're a prayer away from him beginning to help you, to be right there with you and help you, okay? So let me pray with you. Father, on this Mother's Day, I'm thinking about all the people that have storms going on in their life. Some are really severe, some are kind of mild, but they're storms. And some people right now, they're hearing this and they're stressed out and they're wondering, what's my next step and what am I going to do and how am I going to get out of this and how am I going to get through this, and God, please help me. Lord, I just pray that right now you just bring some faith into this room, that people would understand and realize they can trust you. We can always trust you. For some of us who have been through storms that even though we might be going through a difficult time, we can look back to the last storm and say, you know what, you got me through that. I might even have learned a few things through that storm. You've made me stronger so I can face this storm. But even as I face it, I know you'll be right there with me to help me. For somebody who's in the worst storm of their life, that maybe you're carrying them right now and they don't even know it. God, in this moment, speak to people, Lord. Help people. Help the person who's panicking right now. Help the person who's suffering right now. Help the person who's confused right now. Give clarity and perspective to the person who really needs it in this moment. I believe you're going to do that, Lord. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.